Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light.
A year and a half ago, Ron Gingrich, our congregational coach, gave me a blessing as I prepared to go on a 4-month sabbatical. And he began by saying that the word Sabbath in Hebrew means stop. I think we should try saying that. Stop. Like, no, a little more. Stop. There we go. And that's the way he said it. He said it like that. I don't know if you remember any if you were here. And I've been thinking about that blessing in our Sabbath series. And Talash and I were talking, and I remember it as a sermon. And she corrected me and said, no, that was just a blessing. But it felt like a sermon. And it echoes in my mind repeatedly, stop. And so I want you to listen for that word, stop, in this sermon. Pay attention to that word and where you hear that word. The late Don Steiter was a member of College Mennonite Church and a friend of mine and a longtime friend of Beth's family. Beth knew Don from when she was a child, way back in Cleveland, Ohio area. And Don had also been in charge of the physical plant at the Mennonite Seminary in Elkhart when I was a student there. And we caught up with Don and got to learn him a bit more. And then all of a sudden I became his pastor here at College Mennonite Church. Don was a friend to many people. Many of you will testify, I'm sure will testify to that, those of us who knew Don. On one occasion, we had a spruce tree in front of our house, beautiful Colorado blue spruce tree, which I loved. I loved that tree. As a child of the Pacific Northwest, I love evergreen trees. And when you see one here, it makes your heart warm. Makes my heart warm. But that tree died and needed to be taken down. And somebody said to me, you should talk to Don Steiter. And Don's eyes lit up when I said, Don, I've got this tree. You've got a tree that needs to come down? And Don came and by himself it was right up against the house. He took it down. Just amazing. But that was Don did those kinds of things for many people. He was a warm-hearted, generous person who cared about people in his lives. One day, it was a Friday afternoon, I remember vividly, late Friday afternoon, I had a phone message. I missed the call, and I had a phone message from somebody here at College Mennonite, and they said, Don died. Come quick. And I stopped. You stop, right? When you hear that, you stop. And I stopped. And I kind of went through my mind who was the person who was calling me, who was the Don they were talking about. And I called back, and the message was that Don Steiter had died, collapsed in his driveway, uncertain cause, and he was this person was at Don's house. So I stopped. I dropped everything that I was doing. I stopped thinking about my sermon on Sunday. I stopped worrying about all the things that were on my mind. And only one thing mattered, and that was getting to Don and Dorcas's house on Indiana Avenue, north of Goshen, as fast as I possibly could. And so I did. I headed straight there. And sure enough, there was Don's body laid out in the driveway. And a whole crowd of people gathered at their house, grieving, praying, laughing, and crying. And because the cause of Don's death was uncertain, and it might have been an accident involving a piece of equipment, we all had to wait there with his body for hours, literally hours, for the coroner to come and do an investigation. And there we were, together, grieving. At one point, somebody said, "Let's send out for pizza." Okay. Another person said, I hope nobody's offended by this, Don made wine. And there was wine in the basement. Somebody said, "Let's get that wine out." Pizza and wine. Sounds like Eucharist to me. This was a tragic event. Tragic event. Yet in that tragedy, the sacred broke upon us. Everything stopped. We stopped. We didn't need anybody to tell us. We didn't need a preacher to tell us. We didn't need the Bible to tell us. We knew that we had entered the sacred. We had left time. We stopped thinking about all our worries, all the commitments, all the things that we had to do. And we embraced that sacred time. We remembered Don. We loved him. We were with him, keeping vigil in that space. It's a precious memory to me. And there are many deaths at CMC that I remember in that way. Stop. Time stopped. And we left time and entered this different dimension altogether. So Pamela and I have been at College Mennonite Church 13 years. She's been here 2 weeks longer than I've been here. 2 weeks? About 2 weeks. And we reflect back together over 13 years, and we have had more than 300 deaths at College Mennonite Church in the time that Pamela and I have been here. College Mennonite Church has seen 300 people die. And that's a lot. And we will reflect on that, on the grief that number represents, and also the changes in how we grieve, our practices around the time of death. And I'm going to say some things that are not meant to be judgmental, only an observation. And if I were to be judgmental in these things, I would be a hypocrite. I'll say these are observations. It used to be, in the early years of our time here, when somebody died, everything stopped. The lives of the loved one who died stopped. And the funeral services, the memorial services, took place almost always within a week of the time of death. We entered the sacred together with families in those days. This is not the case anymore. Now there's a death, and almost always the funeral or memorial service is extended several weeks, sometimes months after the time of death. And the reasons are clear. We're trying to squeeze the sacred into our busy lives, into the lives of clocks and calendars. And so it goes, the first thing that we do when somebody dies is not stop. The first thing we do is look at our clocks and our calendars. And we think, when will this funeral work? And this is true both from a church side and a family side. Families will say, well, we can't do it that weekend because so-and-so's got a retreat that they're going on. Oh, that weekend won't work because there's this going on. And, oh, there's the traveling baseball team that weekend. Can't do that. On it goes. And so we end up squeezing the sacred, the holy, the honoring of this liminal space between this world and eternity. We end up squeezing that into our busy lives, accommodating ourselves to the tyranny of time. This is unfortunate, I think. And I will confession time, that when I have a death in my family, almost certainly we will do the same thing. We will squeeze the sacred into the convenient time. The structures of our lives insist on it. They demand that we squeeze the sacred into whatever time fits. Well, I got 5 minutes here, I got 10 minutes there. That weekend will work. No, that weekend won't work. Demands that we do that. Everything wants our time. Employers want our time. The lawn wants our time. The dishes want our time. Food preparation wants our time. These are the things in the children's time. They want our time. The Chicago Cubs want our time. Netflix wants our time. Hulu wants our time. Law and Order wants our time. Our grandchildren want our time. Many of these things are wonderful things. The local nonprofits want our time, dare I say. College Mennonite Church wants our time. Phil Waite wants your time. Rebecca Slough, our church board chair, wants your time. Wants our time. The Gifts Discernment Committee wants our time. These are good things. And when Rebecca asks, or the Gifts Discernment Committee asks, you should say yes. The demands on our time are constant, and we cannot stop. We cannot stop ourselves. Our phones in our pockets are buzzing. They want our time. Stop. Time is a tyrant, a brutal tyrant, demanding of us everything and shutting out the sacred. And like most tyrants, time leads us to believe that we are free. You are free to do what you want with your time. Friends, this is a lie. Time is not giving us freedom. Time is a tyrant. Time is loading us down with heavy burdens. Time is making us weary. Time is making us heavy laden. Jesus says, "Come to me, and I will give you rest. Come to me, learn from me, for my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." I am not like time, Jesus says. Stop. Stop, stop, stop. Come. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light, and you will find rest for your weary souls. One of the wonderful things about Sabbath is that it involves practices. It involves practices. And practices are practical. And so we think specifically about practices. But they aren't the sort of practices that you squeeze into, where you squeeze the sacred into your busy life. They're the sort of practices where you prepare for the sacred to break upon you. You will notice in Sabbath practice, we don't use clocks and calendars. We use the sun. In the Jewish tradition, at the last light of the sixth day, the sacred breaks upon the people. And for Christians, on the first light of the first day, the resurrection day, Sunday, the Lord's Day, Domingo, the sacred breaks upon us. What is asked of us is to be open to the sacred, to be ready for the sacred, to prepare for the breaking in of the sacred upon us. Of course, if it happens every week, we know it's coming, and we can get ready. And sometimes the sacred breaks upon us, and we're not quite ready. We don't expect it. But the sacred breaks upon us. So what does that mean? What does it mean to stop? Well, the story about Don Steiter on that Friday afternoon for me, I stopped doing a number of things. What did I stop doing? I stopped thinking about my plans for watching Netflix or the Chicago Cubs or whatever it was I was going to do that Friday evening. I stopped working on my sermon. I stopped thinking about those things. There was no room in my mind for those things anymore. I stopped. Life in time stopped, and we entered the sacred. So what does it mean on that first light of the resurrection day? How do we stop? Pastors have a conflicted relationship with Sabbath. I will say that you should do what pastors say, but not what they do when they talk about the Sabbath. And there are some things about that are sort of obvious. One is that the Sabbath is a work day. It's a work day for pastors. Never, ever say to a pastor, "Have a nice weekend." Don't say that to a pastor. Pastors don't like that. Or, "What are you doing this weekend?" "What do you think I'm doing this weekend?" "Got a funeral on Saturday and I'm preaching on Sunday." I don't say that to people, but you can imagine how it feels. And so we say, well, I take Monday off as my Sabbath. Oh, come on. You should challenge us when we say things like that. Because we're not being completely honest, most of us. Maybe a few are. But I'm not. Sabbath just simply is a shorthand for a day to get everything done that I couldn't get done the rest of the time. It's a day to mow the lawn and to wash the dishes and to go grocery shopping and all the things here, do the laundry and so on. That's not Sabbath. Sabbath is about entering into the sacred. Now, we're getting playful with this. This is practical. What does this mean? Does this mean on the Sabbath, as we think about practicing, we're not going to spend the afternoon holed up by ourselves watching baseball or watching the latest thing on Netflix? We're not going to go out to eat. We're not going to surf the internet. We're not going to answer our phones for just anything. Check all those text messages. Do our email. On and on and on it goes. We stop. What will we stop doing? The early church theologian, St. Augustine, has this marvelous quote. Whenever I think about rest, I think about this quote. And it comes early on in the book Confessions, if you want to read kind of that whole passage and where he's going with this. And he says, "Our hearts are restless until we rest in you." Our hearts are restless until we rest in you. And he goes on to reflect on this and what this means. And he concludes that we are, each of us has our existence in God. We cannot exist without God, and we have our existence in God. And all these things that pull us away from that, all the demands of time, take us away from our true sacred space, the true sacred place where we belong, in God. And Sabbath is the day where we practice that, where we remember that, where we live into that. Our own Lee and Susan wrote that wonderful hymn that we sang earlier in the service. It is a day that we remember that we are God's beloved and that nothing else matters. All the things in time, they do not matter. Jesus said, "Stop, come to me, and you will find rest for your souls." And dare I say, it's the only place where we will find rest. Amen.